Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third discussion of The Warrior Prophet. This is the second book in the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Baker. We are reading this series about 100 pages every week and meeting up for discussions. They are being released. The discussions are being released both on Steve's podcast, which is called PageChewing, and my YouTube channel called Reading by the Rainy Mountain. Steve puts this up on Sundays. I put it up whenever I remember, which, as it happens, happens to be on Tuesdays. So, yeah, sorry about that confusion and mismatch. But yeah, we're trying to stay regular with the uploads regardless. Expect them once every week. We are discussing chapters 9 through 13 today, and next week we will meet up to discuss chapters 14 through 17. That goes to the end of part 2, and it's still about 100 pages. If you would like to join us for any of these discussions, either here in the discussion group or on the forum to have conversations with us, please consider joining the PageChewing forum. The discussions are being released as audio only, so if you're camera shy, consider joining us anyway. With me, I have my usual group of friends. Steve, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Sure. Well, you put me on the spot. So I'm Steve. This is my second time reading The Warrior Prophet. I've read the whole series once before. This is actually my least favorite book in the series.
Mhm.
So I'm curious to hear what everyone has to say about this one. And I love the series, but this is probably my least favorite.
Hmm.
Well, I think it's a little different now to reread, but we'll get to that later. So, but anyway, yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for coming by.
Cool. I'll have to ask you questions about that later, but Carl, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Carl D. Albert, self-published epic fantasy author of Truth of Crowns, member of the PageChewing Forum, and first-time reader of the Prince of Nothing trilogy. Very much enjoying the Warrior Prophet, and actually, I have found myself, particularly in this section, I think, uh, more engrossed than I was in book one. Although that may also just be a symptom of, as we discussed in our very first discussion of the warrior prophet, being more comfortable with the world and these characters and having that prior investment. But I'm excited to talk about it because this last section in particular really I found quite compelling.
Hmm.
Hmm. Dan, would you go next?
Yeah, I'm Dan. I've read the series multiple times, and I'm here to just help discuss the topics from a different perspective. I think everyone but have read it the most because Steve only read it twice. Well, one time and now second time. And I read it. I don't remember.
Noob.
Definitely more than twice.
Flexing those rereader muscles. Mike.
Hi, everybody. My name's Mike. I'm also a member of PageChewing Forum. I'm also a first-time reader, like Carl and Barsha. I am enjoying this book. I can't say if I like it more or less than the first one. I want to wait until the end, but I definitely had there's a few chapters here that really vibed with me. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I missed you all last week because I was traveling.
Yeah, we missed you too. And I'd really like to hear what both of you, Carl and Mike, since you both weren't here last week, what you thought of the previous section as well. I
I
think,
think we can tie it in to
yeah.
all the discussion. I'll also apologize in advance if I ever cough or whatever on mic. I am currently sick, or my little brother, I'm also sharing a hotel room with him. So if you ever hear a random voice in the background, that would be who that is. It's not the ghosts in the walls this time.
Oh, Ghost would have been cooler, but okay.
I agree. You know what? I agree. I don't know that my mental health necessarily agrees, but emotionally, I agree.
Yeah, yeah. This was my. I did enjoy the previous set of 100 pages more than this one, but I don't know. Steve, were there parts you did not like in this book, and that's why it's your least favorite book, or just you like the others so much that this was your least favorite?
That's a good question. It's funny because I think a lot of people point to this one as their favorite book. I think this is the one that like really hooks people. I think the darkness that comes before can be challenging, but I think this book brings a lot of people back into the series, and a lot of people love it. So I was surprised that I didn't like it as much. I think it's because, and I'll try and be careful here, I think it's because it's more plot driven and not as much character for me.
Mm.
So that's why, and it's still good. Don't get me wrong. I still enjoy it. It's just this one and one of the ones in the second half of the series are my two least favorite, but it's still good. So when I say it's my least favorite, that means that it's still good. It's just not,
Mm.
you know, it's not like the darkness or it's not like the unholy consult. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I think that's just the focus. And there are things I'm noticing on a reread that I didn't notice. I don't know if you could notice the first time, but that point to things that are going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it at that.
And it's impossible to know it the first time you read.
Yeah. And you wouldn't know. Yeah, there's no way of knowing. So, but on a reread, knowing what I know, reading the whole series, then I can see things differently. But there's no way you'd ever know reading on the first read.
It's interesting that you talk about this book as being more plot driven. I don't know that I had like sort of, I mean, I think there's always a tricky sort of like, where do you delineate? You know, I think there's some books where it's more obvious than others, where it's, you know, character driven versus plot driven or what have you. But I do feel that for this book that like, certainly it feels like the events are carrying the characters more than, you know, I felt like we got to sit with the characters a lot more in book one, as opposed to this one where it feels, you know, faster paced in general. And it actually reminds me more of Malazan in the last book did, in that I really feel like the tides of like history shaping the events and, you know, the world at large really feels quite alive. In a way that like the book one definitely had elements of that, but like it also felt like it spent a lot more time kind of, I don't know, navel gazing with some of the characters, you know, in particular Akamian and Esmenet. And I don't even, you know, that's kind of pejorative, but I just mean, you know, them sitting there and like ruminating on things and their feelings and thoughts, which we still get, but certainly less. You know, so a lot of this so far has been, you know, describing events as they happen and conflicts as our characters come up against them as they march with the Holy War.
Yeah, I think the first book is it's just set up and we need to learn these characters a lot because we have no knowledge of them and we need to learn all the factions and all the stuff. And the second book is very much like, how do the forces affect our characters? Because this is like the Crusade and the factions acting on the characters, most of it. And then the third book is like, okay, how do they react and what's the final payoff to all of this? So I feel like for me, Steve, if you're rereading and you know what the payoff is going to be, you're like, oh, I want to get to the payoff, right? So maybe that's it.
On the first read, even on the first read, this was my most anticipated, but it was my least favorite on the first read too. But I will say that there's some moments in this book that you'll think back on. I'm being careful. You'll think back on later in the series. So it is important, like I said. But
Nice. So the first chapter we get, I think this is the first time we're seeing Maithanet actively on the page again after that interaction with Akamian. What did you guys think of that?
So exciting. Always exciting when we get to see him. I mean, I think even more than when he's introduced, you know, he certainly was talked up a bit in advance, but we didn't necessarily have as much context. You know, we were like, who's this Shreya? Like, oh, so this guy's like the Pope? Like, what's going on here? What's the deal here? And I think now that we've been spent like basically a book since we last saw him, talking about him and hearing about him and experiencing things that he's making happen, but we don't see him directly acting. And so suddenly his presence when he's on the page, I found very impactful, and continued to drive my curiosity. And I'm curious to unpack this guy's secrets. I still very much am intrigued on the Moingus's Maythanet theory train. I'm not 100% convinced. I mean, I don't know anyone should be 100% convinced of any theory, at this point before we like find out, got to have a little bit of a skeptic in you. But I just find that very captivating as an idea, and I think would explain potentially some of his actions.
I agree. There would, I guess at this point I am indulging in a bit of confirmation bias. This I was trying. Okay, so I think when we meet this character or are introduced to him, like without actually getting to him on the page, we don't know anything about his dynamism or his ability to move the masses, right? It was almost as if the masses were suggestible and they got manipulated into starting this holy war. But the way that Sirius thinks about how he sees him, the presence that he has, Maythanet, when we meet him this time, it's almost Kellis. Like it really parallels with how Kellis is shown to be interacting with the people. And we see how Kellis again is holding what in my language is known as satsang, basically these gatherings of people and like preaching to them. That has a very religious leader feel to it. So if Callis could do it, why wouldn't, like, I mean, I still don't know why he would do this, but it feels, and this is what, I don't know what the timeline is. It's been less than a year, right? And the thing about Moingus was he took 6 years to become the Shriya and this really influential person. So I still feel like that theory has a lot of weight. But I was trying to remember when Maythanet sees Akamian, when he eyes him, does he say you the same way that what's his name, Chaos does? Does that mean that he's consult? Steve and Dan are shrugging aggressively.
Could be.
It's certainly, I think that's certainly another compelling possibility. I'm curious what Mike thinks after, what are your thoughts on Maythanet in book 2?
But can I just clarify, Varsha, you're convinced that Maythanet is Moingus?
Not convinced per se,
okay.
but that seems the most plausible theory to me, out of all the ones we've considered so far. And I don't know that we've had enough to rule out Maythanet as consult theory very much. It's just the parallels between Maythanet rising up the ranks and Kellis rising up the ranks feel like there's something there.
I will just cut in quickly to say I agree with you, and that's the most compelling evidence for me too. Is particularly tying into the fact that we have now seen that Kellis shows up as a magic user, even though he does not actively practice magic. And so that would explain, and can like identify people, I guess. And so that explains, why Maythanet may not actually be a sorcerer, but can see sorcerers. And yeah, it's the parallels for me. That definitely honestly from the get-go, as soon as it became clear that Kellis was influencing people and Maythanet was, this religious instigator, they're very much doing similar things and acting in a very Dunian fashion. I guess that I'm putting a lot of assumptions on the Dunian because I don't know that they're necessarily supposed to just inherently be, manipulative people. It's just that their ideology and practice lends itself to doing that.
Mm.
And if you need to manipulate a group of people, what better way than, right, culture and religion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think even in this, you can see the parallels to Dune and like that book, right?
Mm.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely.
So sorry, Mike, I in particular interrupted you. What were you saying?
That's okay. I think I'll just share that I was anticipating a resurgence of Mathanet, and I think we only get it. I think the last time he had time in the first book was several hundred pages ago, maybe middle of the last book, and here he shows up on page 190 something, a couple hundred pages into this book, and we really just get a very short glimpse. So there's still a lot of mystery wrapped up in this character, and part of me think I don't disagree with either of you. I think there's so much potential for this character to be somehow associated with the Dunyain or possibly the Consult. But what I continue to wonder about is this very important character of Kellis, we still don't really know what's driving him, except this idea that he's trying to see his father, which I don't think anybody. I'm now on the side of Nair, where everything that comes out of his mouth I don't trust. I really had a disliking for him in this last reading, especially the way he treated Saraway, or the way he's been using her. I mean, and that's saying it politely. Like, he's been manipulating her through men. Anyway, we can get into that later. But I feel like if there is some connection to Mathanet, we certainly hasn't been disclosed to us with, say, Kellis and his father. And then if Kellis is so smart and bright, how is it that he's headed towards this other? I guess maybe his motivation could be that he is working alongside his father, and his father is Mathanet. So there's a chance there, but we just don't know enough about really the true motivation. So for me, that's kind of the key to all of this, because I don't think I think this connection between Kellis and Moangus is not well understood yet at all. Maybe that comes up later in book 2, I hope. There's just still a lot of questions for me. But I like it. There's a few chapters that I really appreciated. I think we got to learn more about, like you said, Varsha, where he is the warrior prophet. He is being viewed as this new prophet, which is kind of like contrary to the whole. I guess people see him supporting the holy war in a way, but I don't know. Anyway, it's been interesting to follow his trajectory here.
I've found Kellis's whole storyline very compelling. And to be honest, I think we all sort of, in some ways, predicted it. Had a very Dunyain, reading the, people's behaviors. Were like, where's this going to go? What are they going to do? How are people going to act? And the idea that he was going to influence this holy war seemed likely, and it certainly played out. Although it has played out in some ways I didn't expect in some of the details. On that kind of note about predicting the future, I want to highlight at the end of it's chapter 9, right?
Yeah, the chapter 9, right?
Yeah, at the very end, like literally the last few paragraphs, I guess Kellis is doing the thing he always does by like trying to predict people's actions based off of like who they are and like the tides of human behavior and things like that. But it kind of seems...
Sorry, what are we looking at? Chapter 9?
Yeah, the end of chapter 9.
The last couple of
It
paragraphs.
seems like he straight up has a prophetic vision.
Right?
Oh yeah.
Like that doesn't seem like he's just predicting behavior. Like that seems magical. Like that seems like the spice melange, influencing you and like giving you. Sorry, again, Dune reference, but like this is like nameless schoolman climbing a steep gravelly beach, a nipple pinch between fingers, a gasping climax, a severed head thrust against the burning sun, apparitions marching out of morning mist, a dead wife. Kellis exhaled, then breathed deep the bittersweet pinch of cedar, earth, and war. There was revelation. Revelation, right? Like the things that happens to prophets, Like this is a guy who's like none of this magic stuff. I mean, I guess he now knows magic is real, but like it was a big issue for him accepting that maybe prophecies are a thing, and he's still not certain about that, right? And we've discussed that. Like, how does that tie into free will and everything? I mean, this dude, like he's not predicting people's actions here. He's seeing the future. Like that's not like that's magic, So I that really stood out to me because I was like, this is not what he's normally been doing. What he's been doing before was very much just like, oh, I can tell you're going to act like this, and so and so. All these people's behaviors will lead them to do this. But he's having images, distinct images that I don't know. I'm curious about everyone's thoughts.
I sort of agree with you. I did write down a note here about this reads a lot more like prophecy than a prediction or a projection from current events. But some things that may serve as a counterpoint to that notion is, I think, what Kellis was struggling with. He does statistical analysis and he has enough parameters, some variation of statistical analysis, whatever passes for that in this world. He uses his initial parameters, whatever, and then he predicts what's going to happen, right? And his whole problem with why he doesn't understand war yet was, I think, to some extent, the notion of scale, that he didn't know enough about how to blend so many variables together and predict what's going to happen next. Now, the other thing that I don't know is how far into the future. So it has to be something like, if this happens, then this happens, and you go follow through that entire sequence and branch out, kind of like a star search tree or whatever, right? Like if you've like a search tree, you build out, you start something, and then you branch out, and then you branch out further, and then you find possible solutions to whatever you want. So this could very well be just the furthest, I'm so sorry for using computer science terminology, but like furthest node in your search tree. And then like basically you trace a path, and this is one of the places you could end up at. This could very well be that, but I don't feel like we know enough about the Dunian's abilities to say one way or the other. So it feels like playing several very complex games of chess, and you're like, okay, if I do this and then all these other things happen, then this is where we'll end up. The representation as images, once again, it feels like prophetic visions, but it could also be, this is how he processes information for his statistical analysis thing. So there seems to me to be an explanation, but it feels very far-fetched, if that makes sense.
Sorry, before we continue, can I double check what chapters we're talking about? Because maybe my version is different, my ebook book version. Because you said chapter 9?
Yes,
Yeah.
chapter 9.
Chapter 9 is Maythanet. And wait, what am I looking at here?
Yeah, it starts with Sirius and Maythanet. Then there's a conversation between Proyas and Cinnamon. And then I think the last section.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Kellis in the trance thing.
Okay, yeah, my ebook reader on the computer splits it up in weird way. Okay, I'm following. Sorry, go ahead.
The ebook is weird, but it's page 201 in the paperback if you are following along. It's the end of chapter 9.
Cool. Okay.
I was just gonna chime in here and say, I think this was. I don't remember if this was prior to this reading, but when what's his name? When Kellis tells this Saban character, he kind of explains to him, what's going to happen, how he's going to. Yeah, I think you discussed it last week. How they're going to defeat, the Phanom or the Kisharim. I think that could have been seen as a premonition as well, and everyone did kind of see that as a premonition. But I don't think that is explained very well. Like, what does he know? How did he know that? Like, I don't. Anyway, I didn't. That was something I struggled with, but then it was like, well, I think there was a part in there where he was seeing patterns, or as you said, he's using whether it's some type of rudimentary statistical analysis. But yeah, in this case, when Carl's referencing at the end of chapter 9, it did seem a little bit different. And I wrote down that part about the dead wife. I wondered who's a wife in this right now. Nobody. Could be a future wife, isn't. But then I think we talked about marriage and that sort of thing. But I wondered who it was even referencing. Anyway.
Yes, whose wife? I mean, no, it's a great question. Is it referencing his wife? Like Serway is, I guess she views herself as his wife, but they're not married in any sense. And again, it could be someone else. Like, I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
They do say, they've referenced a couple of times that although Akamian and Espenit are not married, other people and they themselves see each other as husband and wife.
That's right.
I was worried for a brief bit whether it meant Espenit, but we'll see.
I'm really glad, Mike, you brought up the whole thing with Saban, because that troubled even Kellis, right? Where he thought he was basically throwing like shit at the wall and like manipulating Saban, and then he was like, "How did I get the details right? Like, this wasn't actually supposed to happen." I think he thought Saban was going to go and like die, Yeah. But yet he accurately predicted what happened, which definitely, begs the question, like, are his predictions, is it this statistical analysis, or is he tapping into something beyond that, right? Like, is he actually prophetic? And
can he look that far?
Right. Like as he's being troubled by the idea of prophecy, is he actually capable? And just the way he experiences it because of his Dunyan training is like, he at least as of this point thinks it's like his brain reading historical patterns and like psychological patterns and predicting things based off that. For me, like one of the things that was most striking about it, beyond the fact that I just felt like in general it was written differently than when we've seen him sort of predict stuff before, was again the detail. Like, it's so detailed. We're getting detailed images. We're not getting like, this person is going to do that. This thing will happen. It's like these very specific, striking images. Like, how are you predicting, someone holding a severed head against the burning sun, or apparitions marching out of the mist, like the morning mist? Like, you have to be able to predict the weather at that point, right? And you're not just predicting like the weather tomorrow. You're predicting the weather like seemingly significantly in the future, which is impossible. So I like, other than obviously you can like predict seasons roughly, right? So I mean, I'm with Mike. I have no idea what's going on here. Like, I mean, I don't think we're supposed to know exactly. I think we're supposed to be questioning it, but it is certainly strange to me that Kellis had presented himself as only, making these predictions based off like logic. And now he's making predictions that to me are completely devoid of logic and are so far beyond that they have to be magical. But I mean, I don't know. Certainly he is an unreliable narrator. We've talked a lot about his motivations, right? Like, what motivates him. We've previously talked about how, like, it's almost this sort of Buddhist state of peace you guys talked about in the last episode. Like the whole idea behind that, right, is you're like getting rid of your earthly desires. So what does he desire? What if you don't desire anything, nothing's motivating you. You're just like existing. So what is his deal exactly, right? A lot of that's really vague. Still intentionally, I think, because we're kind of kept, like, even when we're in his POV, we're still kind of kept at a distance because he doesn't process things like the other characters do. He doesn't mull over his emotions. He doesn't seem very upset. He sometimes gets like startled, like he has brief moments, but it's certainly, he is not as angsty as all the other characters, or is driven by his emotions. Anyway, I'm done with those thoughts.
That's a great point about the weather, because I don't think we know anything about the Dunian that suggests that they can predict the events of the world, just what each person can do. But also, if you're able to predict war, like if you're trying to bake that into your predictions, Dan, you were saying something?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think you need to necessarily interpret that as him actually predicting the weather. Morning mist can just mean morning, and burning sun is not that much of a surprise in the desert, So you could read this passage. I'm not saying that's the correct way. I'm not saying which one's correct, but you could read this passage as like, when you watch the movies and like some of it takes a pill that makes them compute 1,000 times faster, and you see these flashes of different things they're seeing, right? You could this could be like the literary version of that sort of. It's showing you flashes of things that they see as important, which will be the catalyst for events, right? And this is sort of, this is as much as you can understand because he's going so fast or something.
I would only buy that if he ends up getting things wrong. And so far, he is not getting things wrong to the extent that, again, it surprises him. Like, he predicted things with Saban that he was like, it wasn't supposed to actually work out exactly like this. Like, that was one of the most striking things to me about the last section, was that he made all this happen. And I was like, is he just predicting the future now? Like, is that just the thing he's doing? And then it all came real. And even he was like, okay, like, we're on the same page. Like, Hellas is like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So I don't know. If he's actually supposed to be just logicking his way through this, and that's what's being written there, I think it's bullshit. Because it's so far beyond the odds of like what someone can predict. I could believe in a fantasy setting, prophecy or whatever, but like trying to rationalize it is like where it loses me. But we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. Clearly, there's a lot of mystery left to unpack around Kellis.
I mean, I think he's already shown like more than realistic human capabilities of manipulating and prediction, to be honest.
That's definitely true. I've had to certainly swallow degrees of suspension of disbelief, but it is certainly compelling what he does, and he does some terrible things here.
Yeah.
What else stood out to me in this section about his prediction / prophecy is that, I mean, we fade to black at this moment, so we don't really know what his reaction is to these images. But he got nervous every time before when he thought he could predict the future. But because we haven't seen him react, we don't really know which it is, whether it's following through from his analysis or if it's unbidden prophecy.
Who knows? By the way, Steve, do you think that, because I was reading that part where it says like a severed head thrust against the burning sun, and then I thought about the second series, about those paragraphs. You know what I'm talking about? I wonder if it's a reference. It's somewhat, I don't know. Maybe it's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I thought there's a lot of little details that made me think of later in the series that I'm surprised he snuck so much in.
So do you think that would be is a reference or is somewhat? I don't know.
I think so. Yeah, I think there is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that I have a theory here it could be completely off base, but I just thought of this now, but he could be working with another Dunyan that we don't know about. I don't know, like he could, like he's so he can. Anyway, I'm just because some of the things that he seems to know, I don't know if they completely come out of the blue. Like we might get some surprises. Maybe I don't know.
You mean he's like in contact with someone else who's like somewhere else or something?
Or on the other side, like on the side of the Kianin. I'm just throwing out some random ideas. I just maybe it's because at the beginning you guys were saying something like you don't expect what's coming. Like I can't help it. Like maybe I should keep that to myself.
No, helping him manipulate things maybe, so that it happens the way he wants.
What he does, which is so fascinating to me, is he seems to mimic people's voices. So he learns enough about you to be like, oh, well, I see that your friend, you are maybe you can be emotive for one reason or another because of a certain person from your past or another individual in this party here, and then it sounds like there's many cases where he's like, it's very subtle, right? It's like he hinted at what he made an expression that would emulate some other character when he was talking with Akamian.
The classic one is Inra, right? That we get repeatedly mentioned.
Yeah. But did he ever meet him?
No. Yeah, well, not that we know of, certainly.
So there's
I don't know. The timeline doesn't line up there. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think he based it off of Agamian's descriptions of him, as far as I could tell.
What I will say to this theory is more than anything. I mean, I just don't know how that would work unless they're doing dream shenanigans. But what I do like about this is like, the consult is has spies in their camps. I feel like at a certain point, if they haven't already, some of these people need to be sending spies into the consult. And I think the Dunyan are perfectly set up to do that. But they're like clearly separate from all this. They didn't even know the consult still existed. I guess Kellis who knows what's up with Moingus, but Kellis was surprised to learn that from Akamian. That is the end of my thought.
Sorry,
I have no more.
What was Kellis surprised to learn from Akamian?
That the consult and all the apocalyptic stuff was still an issue.
Oh, right, right, okay.
Yeah, it seems like he didn't know about it before. But he also didn't know almost anything about like the kingdoms and what's happening and the different It's like very smart but not very cultured, I guess.
Yeah.
It actually is unreal when you really step back and think about it, that this dude has never interacted with these cultures in his life, and he's able to read through their bullshit so strongly. That's it. Like, this dude has the most preternatural gift for just like, I mean, I guess that's the thing, is it's like he can cut through all the human bullshit that like your culture doesn't even matter at a certain point. He just knows, the darkness that comes before.
I think when I read him, I just assume that he knows everything about the characters he's talking to. I assume they can't keep any secret, and they just like children to him. He can just see through. The children try to tell you lies, and they're like, after they're so surprised that you knew they were lying, and you're like, it's obvious. I sort of imagine it like that.
I see that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think before we move on to the next chapter, the other thing that happened was Proyas and Cinemus Did I call him cinnamon earlier?
You did. I'm here for it though. I was not going to correct you. I think cinnamon is a perfectly good name for him.
Sounds like a dog's name or something.
You know, I mean that's sort of the role he plays a little bit. You know, he admittedly he's like he bites back in this section, but you know, we'll get to that.
Any thoughts there? Or one thing that stood out to me was when Proyas was wondering why Kellis likes a commune and vice versa, and he tells him, "I think Kellis simply sees what I see in Akka and what you once saw. That a man's soul could be good apart from," basically saying that the following this religion isn't the only thing that could make a person good or bad.
So Carl, you mentioned that Kellis is able to see through everyone's bullshit, regardless of like the culture. But I guess it begs the question of: are we all pretty much the same, regardless of what we believe? Are humans just? Is it the same puzzle to solve? Does it matter what we believe or what we decide to devote ourselves to?
Certainly, that's definitely the hypothesis that the theory presented here. Which, I mean, yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I mean, certainly there has to be a degree of similarity between all of us, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's the nature versus nurture question, writ large, right? Like, are you, just, it gets into the free will stuff too, the darkness that comes before is an interesting philosophical, esoteric concept.
Yeah, for sure. Who knows? I've definitely read psychology or societal papers that seems to suggest one thing or the other. First you read one thing, and then another paper comes out, and you're like, maybe it's too much in that direction. Maybe it's a bit more in the other direction. It's hard
my own general philosophy, I guess you could say, just based off of similarly stuff I've read, is that we're all a combination, we're shaped by nature and nurture, and it's endlessly complicated and impossible to actually predict, at all. But I mean, certainly for Kellis, you have to just get on board with the fact that this dude can just read people. That's if you can get on that baseline premise, we're in for a crazy ride.
Yeah, it's that typical premise of the monk trains every day, punches the wall 1,000 times, and then after 10 years he can punch through a tank or something,
Right. Yeah, right.
It's that sort of idea. It's if someone trains for long enough, he can become a superhuman or something in that thing. But I don't know if that's ever happened.
From what we've learned, it's even worse than that, because they're aren't they bred for something? It's I don't know how it works. Yeah. We only got a glimpse into Kellis's training, but I assume they're being bred for certain behaviors as well, which is it's possible to do.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they said Kellis thinks that at some point the Dunyan breed for intelligence or something like that. I forget exactly, which I don't even know how you measure that, but certainly, yeah.
They've also narrowed
they're doing
genes that do that. Or maybe they just breed the people who they think are intelligent.
Yeah, they go, you guys, you're the big brains over here. Where you two can mate.
Oh, well.
This is going to be so much fun. This is going to be so much fun. Oh, I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun.
When we find out how the Dunyan are bred.
I don't know.
Get into that. Okay.
Everything.
Okay.
But yeah, it seems they do both things. They're okay, let's breed for selective traits, but let's also train them to the maximum, or more than maximum possibility, I guess. Which are very, if you think about it, they're very sort of, I don't want to say modern, but sort of rational sort of things. I guess like one implies they know about. Well, I guess you can know about breeding without knowing, any scientific theory.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, like if
I
they
don't know.
got the logical conclusion that, people who are that deep into statistics probably can also figure out that if you like breed people a certain way, these traits emerge or whatever. Like, did
Yeah,
Listen, old Ned Stark figured out the seed is strong. I think the Dunyan can do it too.
I guess.
Don't even get me started on that. That's the silliest. Anything could have. Anyway, whole different story.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, new topic, unless anyone else has more to add here. Kellis creating those religious groups and preaching. That made me deeply uncomfortable. That whole section, like, it was really well done, but it bothered me a lot that he was essentially manipulating severely these large crowds of people. Uh, Not least because there are so many real world analogs that bother me so much that I don't want to get into. But and then when we are in his perspective and he's actually thinking to himself about how successfully he's been manipulating them. Oh man, but it was an incredibly well done section for all of that.
What did
I
it
yeah.
think? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I loved it. I mean, that was one of the chief things I really enjoyed about this section. And I thought it was really interesting that he continues to feign humility. And when I think of someone being I don't know that he's being a demagogue, but like when I think of someone being like a charismatic leader, I feel like they often embrace the role, or they openly express. And I guess it's a relatively short period of time, but like he's actively denying his this idea of him being like a warrior prophet as of being like above other people in some sense. But when I imagine, cult starting, I imagine the cult leader being like, no, yeah, like I'm the guy, I'm the Messiah. And so it's interesting that it's his humility, that his fake humility, that attracts all of these people all the more, on top of his like very obvious competence and wisdom.
True. I wonder if it makes me think that it's just because he knows he's so good that if he says he's not a prophet, but people still think that he is because of, his charisma and everything else, it makes it even more true, sort of. I don't know. But like real life cult leaders or something, they're not obviously as good as him, so they need to use more crude methods, I guess. That's how I read it.
That's a fair point, right? Is like they're not a superhuman like Kellis, right? So that they have to be a little more brute force. And certainly, I'm fully expecting Kellis to get to the point where he's going to say, "No, I am the savior. Follow me." It's just a matter of time. But yeah. Anyway, that was something I thought was interesting.
But I think the main difference is that, like, if you look at what Kellis does most of the time, he doesn't tell people what he wants them to think or what he wants them to do. He lets them figure it out on their own. Because then if they figure it out on their own, it's so much more powerful. So if he's not telling them and they're figuring it out on their own, like, they're a lot more convinced, I feel. But I don't know. But I did want to ask Varsha, when you read this, it made you think of real life. Like, what came to your mind immediately while reading to this? What real life parallels?
So there are a few. So I guess if you look at it's the same, like politics and religion. And I don't know how much this is a thing in Western society or just Christianity and other non-Hindu religions, but there are people who gather huge crowds around them with mostly the intent to take money from them. and who manipulate the heck out of people, and and they're like these religious leaders, right? There are places in India where, and I'm not saying they're all bad. A lot of them make a lot of sense, teach people wisdom, but most of them who are ill-intentioned do so by creating a dependency on themselves, by making them think you need me to give you wisdom. I will bring you closer to your God in these ways. And all of that is just blatant manipulation. And this felt very much like that. He's not someone who wants to do good for people. He's doing all of this because he wants to get something out of them. It's not money, sure, but it's something. They're all a means to an end. And sure, he may be helping all of them in this process, but he is very much creating this deep dependency where, his presence or lack of it is a whole. Like they're almost addicted to him. They need him for their existence. And that, again, is unfortunately true of some people I know who follow said religious leaders. And yeah, I did like, with all that said, I did really like the whole conversation we had about or not all seeing is witnessing. Like, we should talk about that in some detail. But just this notion of this person becoming a religious leader in this manner, which is not helpful, in my opinion, to society in general, is, yeah, that bit made me very uncomfortable, and in a good way. Like, I feel like that's being criticized here. So it's not that I'm disliking the book or anything. I'm just saying that section was well done, so it made me because of the parallels that I saw, I was like, I don't like this.
Oh, it's real. Yeah, it's super real. It happens all over the world all the time. I think so here's a new theory. So you guys, like, when we occasionally talk about, like, the real world inspirations, right? So the Crusaders take Jerusalem, aka Shime, right? I'm fully expecting that to happen. I think they're going to win this holy war. He could veer, Bakker, it's a fantasy story. He could veer left, and do something totally different. I mean, he has to, right? Because we're getting to an apocalypse. So, like, the world didn't end after the First Crusade. But this hadn't occurred to me. But clearly, we're watching Kellis like be on the rise. In the original, the First Crusade, one of the leading crusaders, one of the princes, took over Jerusalem and became the king of Jerusalem. And so my theory is that Kellis is going to end up as the king of Shime, probably at the end of this trilogy. That's my theory for it. I'm just throwing that out there. It just occurred to me while we were talking about, or while I was listening to you, Varsha. So random thought, random theory.
I like that. Doesn't the title of one of the books in the second apocalypse have the word king in it? Or no?
I think Adjunct Emperor is one of them, which we keep Aspect Emperor. Yeah. Which we keep seeing. Who's the one who keeps thinking about that? Is it's Sirius, right?
Yeah. He wants to be the Emperor. Sorry, go ahead.
It was mentioned in chapter 9, I think.
Yeah. Oh my God, how Sirius treats the people, that was also very interesting. Yeah.
It's one of my, it's bad to say favorite, but it's like one of the best, I think, parts of this book for me. It's like that, or more impactful, let's say. It's very impactful and very memorable. That scene when he say, "Oh, now they're saying my name."
Yeah.
That part, and also like the, what's it called? The cleansing of Shigek. That's also very brutal.
Oh yeah,
part.
that hurt.
That was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially not like that one. Really, like, it, like, sort of, because when you read the Crusade, you're like, okay, well, this happened. They killed a bunch of people, whatever. But then you read it in this, and it's sort of like, okay, this is bringing to life what it would have been for those people, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's always. I mean, this is skipping ahead a bit, but tying into what you're saying, Dan, it's always the really intimate scenes that bring that stuff to life for me. And it's the scene of Nair going door to door and raping women that really stuck in my head about all of that. That like, and we can get to his character. He has an interesting chapter right at the end of this section. But that I was just like, ugh, horrible. It's horrible to think that people are painting blood on their door, as like to try to ward them off, and eventually that's not enough. And it's brutal. Yeah. Really depressing.
It's really shown as like, oh, this is just a normal peaceful society. This is just like, it seemed to be pretty nice, this place, right? And then these people just come and destroy everything. So
it's totally Egypt too. Shigek is totally Egypt.
Yeah.
And what's the Nile equivalent? We're given a very clear Nile.
But yeah, and the current in Rifi are like probably, I don't know, the Coptic equivalent, because there were a lot of Christians in Egypt, but they're not the majority, and they're left over from previous conquest. It's very you see the parallels.
Yeah, that was brutal. That they weren't doing anything. They were even giving them food and letting them pass, and yet they got trampled. That was insane.
Yeah, it was the fanaticism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I guess we were talking last week about single liners that Bakker does so well. The line that concluded that section, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it was about how Shigek was now cleansed, right?
Yeah.
And that was, that just hit the nail home, I think.
What does it say?
Yeah, it's a lot of really dark stuff. I mean, for sure. Do we want to move on to talking about all the Akamian and Esmenad and Zerwe mix up too of it all?
Yeah, let's.
Is it okay? I was ready to come in on that one for chapter 10 still.
Go for it.
Go ahead, yeah.
To me, I found it very striking that as Kellis's stock is going up, Akamian is I think headed in the wrong direction, especially in chapter 10, and then later on we hear bad things that happen to him. But in particular, he basically is kind of ignoring the mandate. He appears to be happy and at peace in this chapter, even though he's also becoming very enamored with Kellis, and I think we shouldn't be surprised because of the way he's treated various students of his, but this relationship is, as we can, I mean, the way it's written is so well done, and that it doesn't appear to be so bad until you start to really think about how he is used. In particular, this for me is very troubling, how Kellis uses Saraway, if I understood it correctly, to have sex with Akamian, even though it seems like a dream. So again, this is kind of magic-like, or something is going on there where he doesn't really know what's going on, and then she thinks that it's Kellis, so that is with her. So that part to me was, I thought, extremely well done. This chapter for me was probably one of the best I've read, I think, so far. That other part that I found really creepy was the Wati doll.
Yeah,
that was really, which I found to be, so based on what we know later, it should be scare. It's said, I think, a couple times earlier in the book, or even in the previous book, that a anyone that can do magic that is not in a school is like, I think, the worst of the worst. What are they called? Wizards or something? It's some in this world, it's a really bad thing. So that to me, anyway. So just to say, like, there was a lot going on, I think, also with the Kamian, as you alluded to, Carl, in this chapter as well. And I have to say, not to go all the way back to the beginning, that I really appreciated the quote from Agensis: "Love is lust made meaningful. Hope is hunger made human." That was an interesting way to start off this chapter.
Yeah. It for me, this section here with the Camion in particular, I just found it was the most moving part of this for me. I think maybe because it was the most personal. I'm talking about something being character driven. And, we saw him act a little more, but we also saw him as usual getting acted upon. And I, like you, Mike, I at first was like, is this magic going on with Sarah? Is this a dream? Like, what's happening here? The way he wrote it, it reminded me of the scene earlier in the book with the prostitute, right before he reunites with Esmenet. And I was like, is this the console? Like, what's going on here? It was, I have to imagine it was a very deliberate choice, and I'm still left with not mixed feelings. I had very strong feelings about it, but mixed thoughts, I guess you could say, about what exactly was going on there. Like, is Surway completely delusional? Like, was she drugged? Or is she just like truly like drinking the Kool-Aid so much that she thought she was sleeping with Kellis by sleeping with, because she thinks her baby is Kellis's, even though Kellis has never laid with her. So maybe, it's probably just a continuation of that. But yeah, I just found it really upsetting, frankly, that Akamian has found this happiness and he judges, Esmenet so much for her job and her sexuality. And then, like, I don't want to speak to anyone else's experience, but I've been in relationships. I'm currently single, but I've been in relationships where, like, people have come on to me and, like, you can say no, like, it's, you can stop them. Like, it's not like this, you're overwhelmed, with lust. And so I just found it really upsetting, but very, like, powerful. Like, I think really wonderfully written that Akamian, at the end of all this, after all that he's gone through, just like lets Surway fuck him. And it's just, and then where his story goes from there, it's just, I found his arc just like very compelling and very dark and sad. And again, like at like the peak of his happiness, the happiest he's been in years, there's still kind of mud tarnishing it. And then it ends tragically, of course, with the library.
Yeah. I do think it's also good to realize that the way they think, a lot of the characters and the way things happen, it's like we need to realize it's a deeply patriarchal world.
Definitely.
Which men are held to a different standard than women. And it does make you reflect. It's like, it's a lot more exaggerated, obviously, but it's like, do we have similar, more subtle biases in our world, right? On how we would see similar things happening, right?
Right. No, totally. The cherry on top for how just sad it is that Esmenet sees it too, and then she just like accepts it. Like, she doesn't get mad at him. She just accepts it. It's tough stuff.
Even though Akamian has given her so much crap about sleeping with other people.
Right.
She
right,
doesn't
exactly.
even think to bring it up with him. It's as if nothing happened.
Because they don't want to. Well, she doesn't want to admit that it happens, right? Oh, if I ignore it, I can just pretend it never happened. It's a very... I love these characters. They're so they're so human, so flawed, right?
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
But it
Well,
is
and
very sad.
here, while we're talking about this too, I want to touch on something you guys talked about in the last section, which was one of the things I really wanted to talk about, which was Kellis's friendship, in quotes, with Akamian, and how it's seemingly like I at first glance was like felt similarly to how you did last week, Varsha, where I was like, I'm happy Akamian has this, like he needs like a student, like he needs like this seems to be a really enriching relationship for him, and it doesn't seem like Kellis is, he's clearly manipulating him. And it made me even think about, well, if you're like trying to get people to like you in anything, you're actively trying to do things, we all do things to try to influence other people, right? And so I was like, well, if nothing malicious is happening, it's probably not that bad. And then, of course, this happens. And then it's like, no, okay, yeah, that's right. So like, as we feared, Kellis was going to do things to get between Akamian and Esmenet. And I am very afraid of where we go from here with Kellis and Esmenet now that Akamian is not around. I mean, who Esmenet doesn't really know, like, who is she going to latch on to?
As Esmenet may not be as suggestible as Nayer's wife, but I think when we left that section at the end, it was implied, I don't think explicitly told to us, that he had sort of brought Nayer's wife over to his side, right? So I'm anticipating almost something like that to happen, but we'll see. She's still telling Akamian that she mustn't teach him the gnosis, right? Or at least she's apprehensive about it, and he's uncertain about whether it's the right thing to do. But
he says he's going to do it. That's the whole point of like him going to the libraries. He's finally going to teach him. And I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of excited for it. I was like, oh yeah, let's give Kellis magic. Like this dude's already like too powerful. I'm like, why not? Like it's only gonna get crazier. And
What's
then
he gonna do with magic?
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm like, okay, I'm here for it. Like I want the mess. And then the library gets burned down. So it's like, okay, well, Akamian is captured.
Sorry, to remember, was he also like in previous chapters in the last book, maybe like reconstructing like mathematical theorems from nothing, just like figuring them out on his own?
Yeah, he was, and disproving some stuff that Akamian was trying to teach him, and reworking some previous theories. Yeah, he did that.
Okay, good. Sorry, continue, Carl. Sorry.
I mean, I don't know that I have any more to say on that other than I can't wait for him to learn magic because it's only going to get more messed up.
So what do you
think? Dies.
Who dies? Sorry.
If Akamian dies, who's going to teach him?
Right.
No, Akamian can't have died yet. He
has to write his history, right?
Yeah. He has to write his history.
Apparently, he's getting tortured or something.
Maybe Akamian Jr. that writes the history or something.
Akamian Jr. We don't even realize it's Drusus Akamian II. Oh no.
That is so foreboding though, where it's been leading up to this where Akamian is like the last thing I could do is to teach somebody the gnosis, to teach him, it's so protected. I will be destroyed by the mandate. And then he's like, this is the thing I must do right before, I think, is that right before he gets taken or captured? And so that's why I was saying, like, I feel like he's definitely on a downturn here. He's like, whether he's he's obviously one of the main characters of the books so far, but he's just at this point is just being manipulated, or at least for me, I don't know how others think, but I really feel like that's the wrong thing to do here. But then again, maybe
the gnosis
is the savior.
Totally.
I just don't buy it.
I think Carl just wants to watch the world burn. That's
Yeah, no, I'm at the point. I'm like, it just let's get crazy, okay? Kel's already starting a cult. Give him magic, and then we're really cooking.
But what's he gonna do with it?
Exactly. That's my entire point. I don't even know. Can you imagine? Kells can already basically do whatever he wants. Give him magic, like, oh man.
So maybe there's a reason why Akamian was snagged, because somebody has been watching him and knows that he's gonna make a boo boo.
yeah.
I mean, I think that's sort of what happened, but just not that exactly. Is the Scarlet Spires thought he's a Sisharam spy, and they were like, "All right, we're going to take you and find all your secrets."
It's isn't it Preyas that thinks he's Kisharam? And then that makes sense.
Confus, I think.
Is it Confus?
Oh,
You're right,
Confus thinks that Kellis is no, Agamian. Sorry, not Kellis. Yeah. He thinks Kellis is by extension because he hangs out with Agamian so much. What was I going to say?
Also because if you remember, unless I'm mistaken the parts, he is there when that whole thing happens, right? With the skin spies and everything else.
Is he there, or does he hear about it from Sirius?
No, because they catch him and then they call Akamian to the dungeon or something, right?
Right. And is Confus present there with Sirius?
Confus, I'm trying to remember if he's there or not. But I think that's what makes the Scarlet Spires suspicious, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Remember correctly. Go ahead, Steve.
I think he's there after they discover.
Yes.
So he's, but then they think because he communicated with him that they had interactions that he must have known.
Yeah.
So they assume that he must have known.
Because I think he looks like he knows something when he sees it, but he can't explain because it's like, well, he can't explain that it's the consult. But they assume that he knows because of other reasons, because because they think that the face transforming things are Cesaurim, right? Not the consult.
That is such a cool gag, by the way, that you have a school of sorcerers that can do exactly the same thing that the consult is using to penetrate or like infiltrate. That's the word I wanted. Infiltrate the people and the big groups.
I mean, can they?
Who?
Can they?
I mean, I think not exactly the same way, but I believe they think. I think the schools here or the people here don't know enough about the Cesaurim other than they can manipulate their face. So they're like, oh, cool. We know someone, and maybe they don't know the extent of what they can do. So whatever the consult is doing, they naturally think Cesaurim because they refuse to believe the consult exists.
Right. They think that the consult is the Sisharam, because out of ignorance and their refusal to believe, and because they know they can't see the Sisharam, right?
Yes, and
they don't see
magic,
their
and it
fruit.
doesn't show like magic, right? This consult thing, so they assume it's Cesaurim because they can't see it. I don't think they know that the Cesaurim transform their face. They just know that they don't leave a trace of their magic. So I think that's how they connect the piece, like Carl said.
Wasn't there some face magic when Sirius was talking to the king?
It wasn't full facial transformation. It was like a glowing, not like an after image, but like a hologram over the face.
Something like that, or like a window or something, dimensional window or something. I don't know how you call that. I think it was something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought that was the main reason why they concluded Cesaurim, not the mark thing. But you're right, it could be that.
I think the bottom line is they just refuse to believe the consult is real, and that's biting them in the ass.
It will. So I had two things to bring up about Kellis v. Akamian. One, in this chapter 10, he says, when Kellis leaned to place a hand on his shoulder to Akamian, At his touch, Akamian's entire side went numb. For some reason, the prince's smell, leather with a hint of rose water, always flustered him. That feels like a little bit of a parallel between Nair and Moengus' relationship, where I think Moengus was manipulating Nair into. I don't know if they actually ended up having a sexual relationship, but that was where it was going, all that manipulation, at least part of it. And this feels a bit like that. I guess he's using everything in his power to manipulate Akamian. Um, the other thing was, and I refuse to believe at this point that wasn't deliberate, but the, the other thing was Akamian. This I want to bring up for discussion. When he goes to the library, he thinks to himself or tells, I think he thinks to himself that this means that if Kellis becomes a warrior, prophet, sorcerer, then that could mean that sorcerers won't be damned anymore. Um, so
Hmm.
that I thought was very interesting. Well, first, what is the path leading up to that? As in, is it the fact that the prophet is accepted, which means by extension everyone can accept? Like there is one path I can see to how Callus could manipulate a whole bunch of people into saying, "Oh no, sorcerers are no longer damned because I say so." But in terms of just the how Akamian's reasoning is working. What do you guys think? Like how does that happen?
I assume he thinks that you cannot be a prophet if you're damned. So
Mm.
if he is a prophet and he can practice magic, it must mean that there must be some path to salvation. That's how I interpret it.
Okay.
Akamian's whole sense of religion is so interesting to me because it's like for a while I thought he just didn't believe in anything,
Mm.
like any god, or he was just like agnostic, really. But you know, his belief in the damnation, which he does seem to genuinely believe in, makes you think that he is genuinely like adheres even in his own very distant way to the Thousand Temples, presumably. I don't know. He has such an interesting relationship with it all. It's like hard to parse. I'm not really sure what he believes, other than clearly he thinks he's going to be damned. I mean, that's what he and Esmond have in common. One of the many things they have in
I assume that it must be something like when you see the mark or when you see the effect of magic, it must make you feel like it's wrong or something. Because I think we had it mentioned it like that sometimes, like oh, the stain of sorcerer or something like that. I guess we don't know if it's like the characters imposing their own views on it, or if it's something intrinsic that they see. Maybe just like if you see excrement, it smells, and we know that it's bad even without knowing what it is, right? Maybe it's something like that. They just know it's something, some bad thing on the soul or a mark on the soul or something like that. I don't know.
Mm.
But maybe he doesn't believe in exactly the Thousand Temple, but he's like agnostic because he doesn't know exactly what the higher power is, but he knows that is bad. Maybe. Like that's how I would interpret that.
Mm.
I'm gonna guess something, but I don't really know. Because Akamian is descended from this Swatha guy, I assume that he believes in what was ever the predominant beliefs at that time, And I don't know the timeline well enough, but something I keep thinking about because for me there is this connection with Saswatha's time and also the Dunyain. If I'm not mistaken, it's 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's all tied to the apocalypse.
There's something. Yeah. There's something. If you're asking what Akamian believes in, it's whatever. It was an earlier version of maybe an earlier version of the belief system of the in Rithi, so the probably polytheistic views, I guess.
Do we know when the Tusk was written? Like, when did Enrys Sejanus live? Was that before the apocalypse or after the apocalypse?
I'm sure we know, but I can't remember right now. I'm sure there's information in the books that tells us what when there was. Do you remember, Steve?
I think it was. Was it after the apocalypse that they wrote it?
Was it?
I think it was after.
Was it?
What religion did they have before the Tusk? Yeah, I don't remember that part. You're right.
Well, if they didn't write it after the apocalypse, I think they rewrote it, or they reinterpreted it, or they. You have to look. Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't know. Do you remember?
Sejanus.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Sejanus was from 2159 to 2202.
2159. And now what's the current year?
4111.
Something, yeah.
2,000 years.
Seems about.
So that was probably right around the apocalypse, one way or another.
Yeah.
I'd have to look at the first
we went
book.
in the history of Airwell, we could find it there in the cataloged what happened.
Too many spoilers.
But, yeah, you guys
Not
shouldn't
real.
look at it. Me and Steve can look.
You guys you're allowed to look, but
I definitely think that adds, like, that's potentially an important context. I don't know that we need to know that because I don't know how clear it's been made in the book so far. But that definitely adds a context to the Tusk, right? Like, when does this prophet come out? Is he coming out in the middle of the apocalypse? Like, is that, that definitely could influence things.
It was either just around the time of the apocalypse, or immediately after, which was.
I figured it out. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So Swatha founded the mandate in 2156.
21.
And then Enrithi Sejanus was born in 2159.
Also, just after.
So just after.
Okay, he was born in 2159. Okay.
That's really interesting.
I was thinking Sagen is such a vulture, picking on the remains of the apocalypse to create his own religion.
That definitely it like implies a lot about the origin, because you just think about the part of the world that it started in and everything. Like, that's interesting.
But was Seshwata, was he alive at the beginning of the apocalypse or at the end? It felt like it went on for a long time. Like when at the prologue of the first book, that I think is several descendants after the Anasurimbor that Seshwata was serving, right? Several generations after.
I want to say that Seswatha was like 200 years old. Like, I feel like he lived a really long time.
So he might have been alive at the prologue.
I think he ended the apocalypse.
Yeah, he definitely was there at the end. Like, he fought in the final battles. That's for sure. But he might have been there at the beginning too. I don't know. I definitely feel like he and the king lived a really long time. Like, I remember being like, oh, this is like Tolkien, where like the humans live like 150 years. Or like the Bible, in that case too. Abraham's supposed to have like lived for like 400 years or something. So I think we may be dealing in that, like, not what we think of as typical human lifespan.
But did Sejanus write the Tusk? I don't think he did. I think he's a prophet of the Tusk, but I don't think it. I don't think it says that he writes it.
Okay. So did he took the Tusk and reinterpreted it? I just assumed he like wrote it.
I don't think
he somehow produced the Tusk. But I guess, I don't know. That may be a spoiler. Like, I don't know.
I don't think it's. Well, I don't think it says anywhere that he's wrote it. I'm just gonna say that. I don't think it says anywhere that he wrote it. I think the only thing it said is like he's a prophet of the tusk.
Okay.
I think if I remember correctly, that's how it's worded.
So it looks like it's the most ancient. It's the most ancient human text in Urwa, and the
Older than the apocalypse?
yeah. So during the apocalypse, the tusk was evacuated and brought to the ancient Invitian Nimlamesh. So it did exist before the first apocalypse.
Interesting.
Also,
Very-
Saginus is a latter prophet, and there was mention of older
That's right.
prophets in this section.
True.
You're right. I forgot about that. That's a great point. And then you have the even latter prophet who started the Fanim faith, right?
Yeah,
Is it Cayenne is the nation and Fanim is the faith?
I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
I will say that one of my frustrations is I wish we saw more from their side. They feel really they're just not. I mean, we get all of these crazy names for all of. We actually towards the end of this section we started getting random names that none of us are going to be able to keep track of for the Cayenne's side. But I just feel like they've been so much less developed than the Enrithi, and I really wish they, because like when you study the First Crusade or any of the Crusades, like it's endlessly complex. And part of the reason that the Frankish Crusaders could even take Jerusalem was because there were so many competing factions and different caliphates fighting one another. So I will confess to being a bit disappointed in that. I wish we got more from them.
You want even more characters. Sorry,
Yes, just double the length.
Track of
Go full Malazan.
yeah, even more politics, and because I'm assuming there's a lot of politics going. I think it's also mentioned like in some of the parts about possible politics that might be affecting the Tianyin side. Like, oh, these people are not showing up because they don't want to risk their forces right now, or they're too important, or other things. I think it's been mentioned during the battles and stuff.
You're right. They definitely. It's almost like throwaway, but they definitely mention stuff like that. Like there's allusions to more complex politics.
Yeah. It's very hard to keep track of our side. Our side.
Right.
So, sorry, Mike, you were saying something?
Oh, well, I was going to say, what's his face? Scorus is pretty badass because he's like trimming his fingernails when
Yeah.
his the Kisharim or whatever they're called, we're gonna nuke the other side. Kind of like, I'm chilling here while these guys are gonna obliterate you. I mean, it didn't work out for him that well, but then we did learn a bit about how he is very. We learned about how he's, at least I think Nair was saying in the very last chapter, maybe how he knows him and he. Like I actually really appreciate. I don't want to skip ahead, but I did appreciate that we got some more insight into how he is a very, he has like a good sense of humor. He likes to. I think that he likes to make jokes or whatever. But I don't think that they're going to just fall over and be destroyed. I think that actually they've got a few tricks up their sleeve. I'm talking about the Kianin or the Phanim or whatever they're called. I don't know what others think.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely putting up a fight, and I expect that to continue.
I think
it's definitely mentioned that they still have a lot of troops, and not like I think it said like none of the important grandees or very great ones were in the first battle. So I think they mentioned something about all the standards. You can see who is here. Like I think Nair says, I know who's here because he can read the different standards of the nobles, right? And I don't think the major ones were there.
I think they're not making the mistake that this Our Holy War is making, in that they are severely underestimating their enemy, and they have a couple of times. I think it was fortunate for them that they won. Like it was luck, but not really. What was it? Yeah, I don't think that that's going to be repeated very often. But also to Carl's point, maybe she may will be taken regardless because that's how the first crusade went. But also, I was just thinking of this now. The Sylvendi also severely underestimated Confus's army, and there's a. I mean, I guess that tends to happen. Maybe at least based on all the at least in all a lot of the fantasy books, one side severely underestimates the other and then pays for it. But um,
It's true. Yeah.
but the reason or the root of belief for both of them is in some way their religion, right? At Sylvendi, not quite so explicitly, but they worship war and they think they're the best at it. And the Holy War thinks like they don't need strategy because God is on our side, so we'll win regardless. So I thought that was an interesting parallel. Just thought of that now.
Which is true, again, to kind of, I mean, you see it not just in fantasy books, in history, that like people will underestimate the other side and then suffer for it. And I mean, that's, again, a big part of the reason why the First Crusade went the way it did, is because there was a lot of like, well, I mean, these barbarians, like they won't actually like unite, like they're screwed, you know, they can never actually muster this and march all the way to Jerusalem. And then they did. And then it, you know, things quickly changed after that, and the tides of the wars started shifting. And in fact, I think you could argue that the First Crusade is the only one that the Frankish forces really even won. But yeah, I definitely think it's interesting, in that now they seem to be getting serious, and that they've acknowledged that the Holy War is a real threat. Anyone have other thoughts on that? Otherwise, I'll use this to jump into Nair. This dude is crazy. Okay, he's humping holes in the ground. What? I love it. This dude is the biggest like in a cast full of messy characters. He might be the messiest. He's just he has a complete meltdown. Blows up his relationship with Kellis. He's of course gonna come back, right? He's still in the same army, whatever. But like he's almost like a jilted ex. Like he's like, oh, I'm gonna go be in my like tent elsewhere. Like bye, you know. He's just, oh my god, he like hates Proyas, but like also thinks he's like the son I've never had, and like but he's such an effeminate little sissy, like, oh my god, you know. I did love when Kellis like was impersonating him, and I thought that was like just spot on. And Nair is just he's like just such a classic barbarian, but like in a way that he's so complex, you know, like he's like archetypal, but like very complex, you know. And we've talked about his sexuality before and how that adds like interesting layers to his character, and you know his relationship with Moingus and Kellis. This dude is just a total mess. I mean, I love reading about him. I'll be honest. I in doses. Like I realized I enjoyed reading about him a lot more because I didn't have as much of him. You know, I think I struggled at times in book one when it felt like there was just a lot of Nair. And like, I really enjoyed him here when we didn't hear about him raping people all the time.
Well, some of the time.
Right. I mean, like when he was on page, he was doing a lot of rape. But, you know, like relatively, he wasn't on the page as much. And I think I can like handle him better in small doses.
I think it's interesting because like the conflict in his character is because his society is very, let's just say, straightforward. No, I'm not going to say simple, but very straightforward. Everything is like as it appears, right? You need to appear strong. There's not much subtlety, none of that stuff that you see in other societies that we've seen. But he is a very deep, complex, and intelligent character. So like it's that character, but he grew up in a society which doesn't value those things, which values being straightforward, right? So he's both those things at the same time. And he's trying, okay, how do you behave in that way? You have a lot of very internal conflicts, but also he doesn't have any conflict. It's so weird. It feels like he has a lot of conflict, but also he knows exactly what he's doing all the time, sort of. I don't know.
Sort of.
You know what I mean? he's like, okay, I know I'm strong. I know I he knows how to show his strength and his intelligence and his tactics and everything else. But then we also know that he's very conflicted inside, even if he doesn't realize him himself.
He's confident in a weird way while also being the most insecure person in like the entire cast. And he is very competent too. He's very good at what he does. But he's very decisive. I feel like that's a word that comes to mind. Like as opposed to Camion, who can never make a decision to save his life. I feel like Nair has no issues making decisions. I do like, the idea that like he knows what he's doing, kind of, like he's like, he commits, he does things, but like, he's like, God, I hate myself for doing that. Everything, I'm the worst, but it's all Kellis's fault. And he goes back to his dad. He's just, he's like a rabid dog, but a very intelligent rabid dog. He's wild.
And he's so obviously a bad person, right? So obviously, like we everything we see of him almost is him doing like violent or bad things, right? We've never seen him help someone or be nice to someone, really. We've always seen him being horrible or trying to figure out ways of killing other people, right? But yet he's still, I don't know, he's one of the, to me, he's one of the more, I root for him, maybe because he's so opposed to Kellis, maybe. He's the only one that we know that knows Kellis.
I think it does help, right, that because everyone else just drinks the Kool-Aid. And so it's nice to have someone where you like, it makes him more sympathetic than he otherwise would be, right? Because he's just a horrible person, horrible. But I think, the complexities and like his self-loathing and his obvious like emotional immaturity, combined with the fact that he's, he is actively opposing Kellis when no one else really is. I mean, you have like people who are really distant from Kellis are opposing him, and like the consult, obviously, who are just like, I don't know, we're Sauron and we're gonna like kill you all. But at least what we see so far, we'll see. I'm sure there's more going on there. The No God, I'm still very curious about all of it / his deal.
But everyone else that's opposing Kellis, they're opposing the front of Kellis, like his public image. They're not opposing the real Kellis. The only one that opposes the real Kellis is Nair, right? Which I think makes a difference.
Just to jump in here, I agree with everything you said, Carl. And yet, they are the people around him are heralding him as this battle master and giving him whatever they're, I don't know, giving him some special, I forgot what it was, some decoration or whatever, what have you. And I think when I was reading this chapter, I could not help but, it's not that I'm on his side or I don't like him, but I think that he's right, in his views of Kellis. He's very skeptical, and it was he kind of disappeared for a while, which I think was also masterfully done by Bakker, in that because as we were kind of following everybody being so enamored with Kellis, here we have Nair again, and he's like, yes, I'm purposefully not speaking to you because I don't believe a word coming out of your mouth. But for me, as the reader, I was like, well, I agree with you, But so that's why I also kind of was like dreading reading about him again. But yeah, because he's so chaotic, I think too. He epitomizes or takes it to a much higher degree of the human heart in conflict with itself, I think, which I think is from Faulkner. Because he's just like, he's very much in conflict with his own, and his own being. Because he, like you said, Dan, you nailed it. Like he's from a collectivist society and he's an individual. He's trying to do his own thing, which is not well respected in a lot of those kinds of contexts. yeah, so it's a really fascinating character, but pretty despicable.
I just find him so darkly comic. Like I mean,
Yeah.
his story veers into tragedy, definitely, but like I weirdly find him funny to read about in that, like, you know, he's this battle master and he's being awarded all these things and he hates it all. He thinks it's all just the dumbest shit. You know, he's like, oh, they give me another like pansy flag. Like, great. You know, like, I just think it's so funny that he's like, everyone is like, you're so cool. Like, I'm so glad you're leading our army. And he's like, you're all a bunch of losers. I don't like a single one of you. I would eat you all alive. You
So,
know,
yeah.
it's so
He says-
funny. Like,
He
He's
hates them because
he
they
hates
killed
them
his
so
god.
much. Right. It's just I just think it's so fun. Like he's just so miserable, but so I don't know. I just find him funny in a really dark way.
his chapters, I think, are some of the more, at least to me, they're some of my favorite of the first trilogy. It's just, I think after, my favorite characters is Confess, and after it's Nair. Both very bad people, but yeah.
Across all the 7 books or in this book?
The first trilogy.
Okay. Cool.
So I did have a question. And it's not a spoiler because it's mentioned in the first book. But when Nora says, your people killed my god, what god is he referring to? Because in the first book, they do reference to the Utimat. Probably mispronouncing that. Anybody listening, I'm sorry. But they do mention with the no god during the first apocalypse, the Skavendi and that tribe specifically paired up with the no god. So is he referring to the no god being killed?
I think it's the no god. That's how I read that. I just assumed no god was their god, and they worship. I mean, the Skilvindi, so far as I read, are like, you know, they're like the human. They were like the human side of the consult, or you know, like the Easterlings, you know, in Lord of the Rings or something. Like they got under Sauron, aka the no gods. Like that's how I read it. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's more going on there, but and we know the no god is dead, I guess. So
Well, he's
Author was
speaking-
something, but anyways, go ahead, sorry.
I do think I think it's the no god because I thought I read that somewhere. I was even looking at the what came before section, but I don't know if it's in there. But I thought I read it somewhere, but I could be wrong. And I don't think he's dead. I think he's like he's on another plane.
What am I?
Exactly. That part, which is from last week, I love that section.
well, is it? I thought he was dead, but maybe in like in hell was the idea, like spiritual. I mean, they don't like spell it out like that, but my understanding was that they, excuse me, resurrected the no god was the scene we saw in Seswatha's memories, and that somehow they reconstituted him, and then somehow they got rid of him again, and that now presumably the consult is trying to bring him back for a second time. Which also begs the question, what was his deal the first time? You know, like, because he was brought back once. We know that. He did not exist in whatever form. Like, he was not present on this plane of existence. And then the consult brought him back. And then he got banished again or killed or something. Like, a lot of mystery there. Very interesting stuff. Yeah, what do you see? What am I?
Also, what is this place? Was that one of the questions he asked?
Where am I?
Where am I? Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe? I don't remember exactly, but
Was it Seshwata who killed the no-god, or was it the king? I forget who did.
it was oh god, the names.
I don't know if we got.
Son of a king, right?
He was the king.
I don't know if we got a specific, like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they've told us. For some reason, I don't think it says Swatha. Is
No.
this similar to like Lord of the Rings thing where it's Oh my god, I can't believe my brain is blanking on his name. But it was the prince who killed Sauron.
Yeah, what's his name? The son of the king. Fuck. Too many names.
All the names.
If I hear it, I'll be like, oh, yeah, that dude.
Mm.
I can't remember.
The fifth,
Hmm?
Kyranian Great King and Exifus the fifth. Oh, that's
it's mentioned as like when Kellis talks about his ancestry. It's like it's mentioned.
So it's one of the Anasurin boars.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Because that's why it's like the prophecy too, or something like that.
Wow, so Kellis is straight up like Aragorn, but the worst.
For the best.
That's wild. I love it. He's Aragorn meets Paul Atreides. I'm here for it.
I mean, it is, how do I say? To me, like, there's so many references. I read this series as like the grimdark Dune plus Lord of the Rings plus Crusades.
Yeah, that's definitely how it reads to me too. Definitely emphasis on the grimdark, because like even Paul Atreides, like he does some despicable stuff, but like he feels bad about it all. Kellis does not feel bad. Like he's just like, I guess I'll just do this. Like I keep waiting for him to like really do something atrocious, like a real atrocity. We'll see.
Kellis doesn't feel, which begs the question: what is his sense of morality? Does he have one? Because, like, sure, you've reached a Zen state where you don't care about anything anymore, but surely there must be something in whatever philosophy you follow about causing death. Whether, I mean, it may be that it's okay and you all end up in a different plane of existence, or it doesn't matter, nothing matters, so it's fine if people die over this. But there must be something there, no?
It's a good question. I have no idea. The Dunedain remain a mystery.
Yep.
What are their morals, their ethics? I'm also just curious too, is Kellis unique among them in terms of being like a sociopath, or are they all like that? Is he like, because clearly they all do the Zen thing, right? But that doesn't, like you said, Varsha, that doesn't necessarily like predispose someone being like evil, I guess, I mean, is he like, how do we even define whatever, we get into all the morality questions, but are they all like him, in that way where they just they will do whatever, ends justify the means always. And what are those ends, right? Like just to find his dad? Like that seems like a really lame reason to go around ruining lives. But
I think it's implied that having his dad out in the wild, or okay, so we know from the story he tells Nair that something's that his father needs to be punished for going out in the world. But yeah, you're right. The only motivation we have so far is Moing has called him to him and it's like, yeah, cool, I'm gonna go get to my dad in this way. And it's not even clear that he wants to kill his father, right?
No, right? Like, is he lying to Nair? I thought it was quite likely that he was lying. I don't think he knows what he's going to do with his dad.
No.
So why is he ruining these lives? It's
trying to become the prophet of this holy war.
Yeah, take over the world. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to make a bad joke. Go on.
when he said he wanted to take over the holy war, maybe I just wasn't looking for it, or it was obvious but I didn't see it, but I didn't think he was going to do it by becoming a prophet.
Oh, see, I fully, because of the title of this book, was like, that's Kellis. Okay. Like I was like, this dude is going to start manipulating people. Like just thematically, I was like, Kellis is going to start a cult and things are going to get crazy.
Yeah, now I'm just feeling silly for not seeing that coming.
No. Yeah, it's, I mean, because he doesn't have the vibe, right? You're like, this dude isn't a religious leader, but he's really good at it, you know?
Yeah. Mike, were you going to say something earlier? I saw you unmuted.
Oh, it's not related. So I was, yeah. If you were still talking about this, I didn't have too much else to say.
Oh, I think we were done with that, possibly, unless Carl has something to add. But yeah, go ahead.
So I couldn't help but notice that it's just little bits and pieces. We get a little bit more lore or history in chapter 12, where we learned, because we were talking about, you know, what happened with the no god and all of that. We learned that the heron spear, which I think was the weapon that killed him, is lost. I forget who Akamian is talking to. It was maybe Esmenet, because he's like talking about what else needs to happen so that we can stop, you know, if the no god were to return. And then we learned that the Shrank are now roaming half the world, so their numbers are like huge, which I didn't realize. And then this is another mention that I didn't understand at all. And so these are maybe hints to the future that we only have half of the trinkets that are needed.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Half of the trinkets needed for what?
I think this was all to kill the no god, or it's. I can find the exact. It's chapter 12. I don't know if I was jumping ahead or not. If you give me 1 second here.
Yeah. In the meantime, I'll say that what I said before, which I was remembering wrong, who killed the no god. It was not an Asurimber Selamas. That's what I thought he was, but he's not. He's some other dude.
Yeah, it was.
Anyways,
it was somebody else, I think, too. Akamian is talking to Esmenet about what do they think about Kellis and him being the, you know, whatever, savior of the world. And he's basically saying, you know, he's shrugging to say the 3 Cs couldn't be more unprepared for a second apocalypse, and then cites these different reasons here. You know, the heron spear is lost. Shrank roam half the world in numbers 100, 1,000 times greater than in Seswatha's days, and men hold only a fraction of the trinkets. I don't know, capital T. I don't know. It sounded kind of like a video game or something, but pretty cool.
Gloria, right? Is that what he's referring to? Yeah.
That's what the sorcerers refer to.
The
Kore trinkets.
Oh, thank you. That makes sense.
I think it says at some point earlier that they do it to make them feel less important because they're so strong against them. So it's their sort of mockful defense. But yeah, because I think they lost them, and I think we know that. Well, we don't know how they're made. Let's just put it like that. We don't know how they originated, how they work. I don't think we know anything about them. Just that they nullify magic and make the sorcerers into salt.
I kind of thought I had thought that trinkets aren't the Korai, but if it is, then that means the Shrank and or Consult can be killed with them?
Well, they can kill sorcerers. I
And
don't
the
remember.
others?
They kill. Yeah, even the blind guys. This is Aurim. Yeah, they kill even those ones, even if they don't have the mark.
Okay. So the other side has a lot of sorcerers. Is that what's implied? The bringers of the second apocalypse.
I don't know.
That's what the Consult are, I think. I thought they were like the bad sorcerers. It was my understanding. They're like the Forsaken in Wheel of Time.
Well, the guy we saw at the beginning of the first book did have magic, but I guess we don't know if he's Consult. But he did wear a cape with human faces.
Wait, was that dude consult? I thought that dude was separate.
Well, we don't know. We don't know. I'm just saying.
He was a no man. He was a no man. I thought he was like,
Yeah.
separate from anti even.
Well, we don't know. I guess.
But he had a cave with human faces. That you just reminded me that is that how the consult works? Well, I guess that one's a bit more
I'm just saying it's pretty evil.
But yeah.
Well, yeah, definitely pretty evil. Yeah.
Who else do we know who collects faces? Interesting. Okay.
Well, I guess do we know who the? Well, we don't know who the consult are really. That's what I'm trying to say. We don't really know.
No.
Yeah, just the people who. Go ahead.
We haven't been given names yet. Even I think. Like I don't think a single one of their sources.
They are. We don't even know what race they are, right?
We know they were. Well, I guess they theoretically could have a no man among them, but we were told that the no men fought against them too. Beyond that, we don't know what's up with the no. Like, where are the no men? Are they all in the north? What's their deal? How many of them are left?
At least one.
At least one.
At least one.
At least I just got that. Okay. Yeah, are there any other topics that we should be discussing?
I want Steve's quotes.
Yes.
Thank you, Varsha, for highlighting Steve's quotes last week.
Let me see. I think there's a couple. Let's see. I did like the rejoice, the whole suffering thing. Varsha mentioned that earlier. It's like a page long on 212. I did like, though you lose yourself, you shall. What was it? Jeez, hold on.
Well, search for a minute. I think Varsha did mention something like before too, the sermon about witnessing and looking at something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also a very good one. And it's something like, I remember first time I read the books, I'm like, okay, Kells is a manipulator. So I sort of glossed through a lot of these sermons because I'm like, oh, it's him manipulating people. But they're quite interesting to read at, you know?
Yeah.
It's not just random bullshit.
Which brings up an interesting question, because this was one of the reasons that I got very uncomfortable during this section. It's because this made so much sense what he was saying. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm not saying I would be indoctrinated by him, but this made so much sense. And but it's coming from someone who's just saying it to manipulate you, not because he believes it, which is like, okay, what does that mean for me then that I like what he's saying so much? And like, I guess just the general philosophical question of, does it matter who's saying something that you relate to if you agree with it or if it resonates with you somehow?
It's comforting. Yeah. Gives meaning to suffering. I think everyone's looking for something.
Yeah.
So it was, though you lose your soul, you shall win the world.
Yeah.
Another one was, for every god there is a demon. And Mike mentioned the other one earlier. Love is lust made meaningful. Hope is hunger made human. A good one.
Yeah, I love these, like, what's it called? Aphorisms. They're so, I don't know, they sound very good. They sound deep, they sound good, and and you're like, okay, this makes sense. And it's also expressed in a very concise and very imaginative way, sort of like, you know, it makes you think deeply about the topic.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of, if I were to say the same concept, I'll probably have to write it in 3 sentences, and it will sound very boring, and someone reading it will like, wait, what's his point? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Baker's good at that.
I know all about being at a loss for words. There's one more that I liked. When Sirius goes to meet Mathanet, he says, it was a juncture of nothing, only a pocket of peace purchased by Deadstone. I think about the building that they were in. That was really cool.
Nice.
Also, what Akamian thinks to himself, I think this is Akamian. A whore of word and a whore of body about himself and Esminette. I think okay, that's an interesting way to characterize yourself as a whore of words.
There's a
Any yeah.
Oh, so sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was gonna ask if anybody else had quotes, but
There's a beautiful paragraph that where Akamian is in the library. I think this is where it takes place, if I'm not mistaken, where they talk about a book was never read here as elsewhere. Language betrayed the true nature of the activity. To say that a book was read was to make the same mistake as the gambler who crowed about winning as though he'd taken it by force of hand or resolve. And then I'll just skip to the last sentence of that paragraph. For what was a book if not a long consecutive surrender to the movements of another soul? This guy's good.
Yes.
It's like Confucius or something. Like he's really like I can see why Steve, you said when I remembered your video on book 1. There's just so much that is quotable. There's just so much that makes you. I could sit down if I'm a slow reader. I could take my time and just ponder some of this stuff because there is a lot. Like you were saying, Dan, or I forgot who was saying it. There is a lot to think about with just about every some not everything, but a lot of these passages.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the quote. What is practicality but one moment betrayed for the next? I don't agree with it, but I think it is an interesting thought and very colorfully said. And then what was the other one that I did not understand and was curious for your thoughts? Men are forever pointing at others, which is why I always follow the knuckle and not the nail. Anyone have any idea what is being said there? I
did wonder about that. I think he means the person pointing and not the person being pointed at.
Yeah.
I've heard that saying done in a different way. So it's like you have one finger pointing at somebody, but four others pointing back at you, kind of thing.
Oh, I've heard that version too. Okay, so it's like that. Okay.
Bang.
I never got it's 3 at most, where the thumb is pointing upwards.
I've got some
fingers
and stuff.
Maybe if you bend it in this unnatural way.
I'm sad the listeners won't get to have the video of us all doing little pointy fingers all at the same time as we're like trying to be like, yeah, that's right. Okay. How many fingers are pointing?
Yeah, I like an interpretation. I was thinking I'm looking at a right angle, so if someone is pointing at something, I need to think about, sort of the opposite of what he's trying to point at. But I think your interpretation makes more sense.
You could also do this thing.
do a little weird little point, yeah.
Point sideways.
See, I just point with all my fingers. I just go full 5-finger point.
You did this.
You.
All right. On that note of silliness, let's do. I think we've discussed everything we'd like to today. So, Dan, would you like to start us off with the outros? Where can people find you, etc., etc.?
Sure. Yeah. People can find me on PageChewing forum, DNFire17. I don't know when the last time I posted was, a while ago, because I go through. Sometimes I post for a period of time, and then I never post again for many months. So who knows? But yeah, you can find me there. Or if you're into miniature wargaming and you live in my city, maybe you'll find me there. I don't know. Maybe.
Who knows?
Who knows?
All difficult questions. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I'm also on PageChewing.com. And as I mentioned before on a previous episode, I've been talking with Steve about comics. So that's, I think that's another podcast, PageChewing Comics and Manga. We've been talking weekly picks of the week. So that's another thing that you can hear my lovely voice. if you so desire. Next.
Carl?
I am on a lot of social platforms at Carl D. Albert. And ideally find me on the PageChewing forum because that's the happier place than most of social media.
I hope so.
It is. It definitely is. And then, yeah.
And Steve, this time I did not catch you sleeping.
So you can catch me on pagechewing.com on the forums, or on PageChewing podcast, or PageChewing Comics and Manga with Mike.
Cool. And you can find me haunting the PageChewing forum all the time as well. My YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain. And as I said at the beginning, if you'd like to join us for these reading group discussions, please consider checking out the PageChewing forum. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.